Welcome into this week's edition of the Recruiting Breakdown. I'm solo this week because CJ Vogel and Jeff Howe are filming something else that we'll have on Texas Football later today for you guys. A little bit All-American teams and some preview stuff there that involves Anthony Hill, Arch Manning, Michael Taft, and a few other Longhorns, Colin Simmons. So those guys are taping that. So I'm hitting Recruiting Breakdown solo today. And I just wanted to start off with this. Hi. If you're not a member of ontexasfootball.com, you missed the hi this morning. So that's how we're going to start this. Now, what we're going to talk about on today's show, we're going to talk about Bell being back on the field in a second. We're going to talk about the 27 top quarterback on the board, a little bit about Florida recruiting around Bell as well. We're going to hit on defensive line, a little update on Dylan Berryman, some defensive linemen that I think are high on the board, the names to know. Then we're going to end with a little California talk because I feel like we talk a lot about the Southeast Conference and all those areas. But we're going to end the show talking about California because I think there's some real possibilities and some big names in SoCal that I expect to visit Texas this spring and again with official visits in June. But before we get into all that, I want to take a second for our sponsor, the sole sponsored Recruiting Breakdown and one of our favorites. That's Mark Saunders. When it comes to protecting all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects all of it? I got some great news for you. Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders serves the Austin and Round Rock area and the entire state of Texas, and he's the only insurance agent you'll need. That's for everything, all your stuff, home, car, boat, motorcycle, RV, and ATV. Call Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. Here's where I give you a guarantee. You'll be in great hands with Texas alum Mark Saunders. Again, give him a call, 512-218-8571, Austin, Round Rock area, or the entire state of Texas. He's the only insurance agent you'll need. All right, we're going to start with a little Bell this week. So Bell injured in the playoff game, and we had heard – I talked to D a couple of times, and he told me, I expect to be back on the field, maybe throwing mid-February, maybe back – into 7-on-7 stuff, late February, early March. Well, Bell put out a video on social media yesterday that he is now back on the field. So we're back full go with Bell. He got really lucky with his injury. Just needed some time off, was in a boot for a while, didn't have to have surgery. So he was a very lucky young man, the 5-star cornerback from Plantation American Heritage High, one of the most talented programs in South Florida. And Bell was at junior day with his father, Raja, and his brother, who I think Texas is about to start recruiting in basketball, by the way. He's a very talented freshman, averaging about 23 a game at American Heritage. But Bell, good to see him back on the field, back getting the workouts in, putting some video out so everybody knows, hey, I'm back, I'm ready to get going. And the Texas staff was down. Members of the Texas staff were at American Heritage last Thursday. That was A.J. Milwee, Kyle Flood, Chris Jackson, Tashard Choice. They concluded their month on the road, a lot of those guys, with a trip to see Bell, the 5-star quarterback commitment for the Texas Longhorns. Earlier in that day, a little bit, let's talk about Florida recruiting here for a second, because I think it's going to be interesting again this cycle for Texas. Earlier in the day, before the Texas staff made that stop at American Heritage, Tashard Choice went by Chaminade Madonna in Hollywood, Florida. He offered 5-star running back Derek Cooper, guy I believe maybe the best running back in the country. I saw him a year ago. He's 6'1", about 200, 205 pounds. He's expected to run in the low 10.5s on the track this year. He's a former Georgia commitment who's now open. I talked to a source close to that recruitment. They believe he'll get on campus at Texas this spring at some point. But he has interest in Texas. And you guys know Tashard Choice are really good at this recruiting game stuff. And that gives Texas, I think, 5 tremendous running backs on the board right now that have been offered. And that's Javian Osborne and KJ Edwards from in-state. That's Amari Latimer from Georgia, is Xavier Crowell, who just reclassified from 27 to 26 in Jackson, Alabama. And then Derek Cooper at Chaminade Madonna in Hollywood, Florida, who you can almost see the Fort Lauderdale airport from that school. But that's interesting because Texas offers one of the top prospects in South Florida that's not a quarterback. So will we see Texas more in South Florida in the coming years? Possible. I think Broward County before Dade County. They did get punter Michael Kern from St. Thomas Aquinas. Jeff Banks stops by Aquinas every year. But will they recruit more in Broward and Palm Beach counties? Nah, maybe not Dade, but Broward and Palm Beach in future years. We'll be watching that one. But also in Florida, Kenny Baker made a number of stops early last week. Midweek it was. He went to North Fort Myers to see James Johnson, 6'2 and a quarter, 270, 280-pound defensive lineman. Then he went to Fort Myers High to see Kendall Gurville, which we'll get back to that in a second. And then he went to IMG to see Preston Carey and the edge there in the 26 classes, as well as some younger guys. And Cameron Brickle, a guy Texas offered early who's originally from the Pittsburgh area. He's now at IMG. So we'll see if anything materializes, if Texas makes a push with any of those guys at IMG. But I'm here to tell you, one guy they are going to make a push on is going to be Kendall Gurville, the defensive lineman from Fort Myers. He is seen as one of the very best in the country and a guy that I think Texas will want to make a strong run at. He is also a guy that's very friendly with Myron Charles, so he'll know any questions about Kenny Baker and the Texas program he has. He can go straight to Myron Charles, who's from Port Charlotte, down in that same southwest corridor of the state of Florida. Obviously, before Chris Jackson got to the South Florida area to be part of that Diabell in-home, he went to Jacksonville to see Naeem Burrows at the Bowles School. Great school there in Jacksonville. Naeem Burrows is one of the fastest prospects in the country in the 26 class. He was scheduled to be at the junior day, the 20th, couldn't make it due to some family change of plans. But he is a guy that, the thought is he's going to run in the 10-4s this spring. If he hits the 10-4s, because he is a football player that also happens to be really fast. Not a track athlete playing football. It's the other way around. He's a football player that's really fast and explosive. Will Florida be a team to beat for him? Because when Florida starts to get it going, that Jacksonville, Orlando, Tampa area is where Florida makes a lot of their hay. So we'll have to see there. Florida's in the game. Georgia's in the game. Wisconsin's a name on the list. His brother plays at Wisconsin, talking about Naeem Burrows. So we'll see there what happens. But Texas offered Trenton Henderson, the edge out of Pensacola Catholic. I think he plans to get on campus this spring. So the Horns have a number of offers out in the Sunshine State. I expect more of that in future years. All right, Kendall Gurville, again, one of the kind of finish the state of Florida recruiting with him. Again, this guy's going to be one of the top handful of D linemen on the board for Texas in 26. Out of Fort Myers High, 6'4", 275, 280, run stuffer, disruptor, has all the big offers, but he's a guy that you'll continue to hear more and more about with Texas recruiting in 2026. And let's transition from there to D-line recruiting. Kenny Baker's final stop last week on the recruiting trail before the dead period hit was Monroe, Louisiana, Ouachita Parish High School, to see nose guard, zero tech tilt player Dylan Berryman, a guy that Texas has been in a good position for a few months, was on campus multiple times. Kenny Baker saw Dylan Berryman. I went by Ouachita Parish a few weeks ago to see Dylan Berryman mid-January or early January, the week of the Ohio State game, and he is all a 6'2", 315, 320. He has an official visit scheduled to Houston. They got in early and tried to get a date. Kenny Baker and Berryman are talking about the June official visit date that would be best for him. That U of H visit's June 6th through 8th. We'll see if that holds. Texas will want him in on the 13th or 20th, in my estimation, for Dylan Berryman, as you see here. Great kid, super strong, had really impressive in the weight room. But again, he's a run stuffer, over the ball player at the next level. LSU, Brian Kelly, Bo Davis were through there. Ole Miss was through there. Texas, a number of schools, Mississippi State, USC, have been through Ouachita Parish to see Dylan Berryman. But again, a top 300 level kid in the country and a guy that can really play the run. That was Kenny Baker's final stop. I will say this. I think the top D lineman on the board in 2026 is Jamion Winfield out of Richardson High, who I believe will visit Texas either the 13th or the 20th of June. He'll be back on campus, I believe, for a spring practice before June official visits. He is the D lineman who we already have as a 4-star plus, meaning we think I think this guy's going to be a top 35, 40 kid in the country, Jamion Winfield, if not a 5-star prospect if he goes and tests well at combine, at an Under Armour combine or something like that. But he is very, very much on the top of that D-line board and a guy that I think has a chance to be elite on the D-line. A couple of notes in Georgia. There's a defensive lineman at Collins Hill named Deuce Gerald's about 6'2.5", 6'3", 270-ish. Texas was by to see him last week as well, a guy that Texas is showing interest in, along with Bryce Perry-Wright out of Buford on the D-line in Georgia, and Tico Crittenden, a D lineman out of Lithonia, Georgia, in that Atlanta area. Very talented kid, 6'4", about 310. So 3 names to keep an eye on in Georgia on the defensive line recruiting. And then obviously early last week, Kenny Baker made his way to Blue Ridge High in Virginia to see Valden Sone, the defensive lineman who moved to the States from Sweden, 6'4", 305. Brent Venables, his entire defensive staff, what they had of it. Went to see Sone late last week as well, one of the top defensive linemen in the country. Sone was actually on campus for an unofficial visit around the around the Navy All-America game in San Antonio in January. So Sone has been on campus before. He's the guy who's a very talented defensive lineman from in the state of Virginia at Blue Ridge School, who's originally from Sweden. So he came to the States very similar to Hero Kanu, a kid that came to the States is extremely talented jumbo athlete that grew up playing more soccer, a little more basketball, and is developing into one of the top defensive line prospects in the country. So that's a little bit on D-line. And I wanted to close out today with a little California talk, because I think with Texas moving to the SEC, sometimes we get so hyper-focused on recruiting along I-10, which we should be, right? Georgia, more offers in Georgia than ever. Texas offered 2 more guys there last week in Georgia in 26 class. Florida, more guys being offered. Texas in on more players with their success there in the last 3 classes, starting with Peyton Kirkland and C.J. Baxter, and moving on to that 24 class with Jarrett Gibson, Jordan Johnson-Rebell at IMG, even though JJR is originally from Fort Worth. Michael Kern, the punter, goes on and on. Then 25 last year, Diabell in 26. So we talk about those states, but I want to hit on California because I think Texas is going to be in on a number of prospects in SoCal this year. I'm going to start at tight end because one of the biggest reclass so far from 27 to 26 is Mark Bowman, the tight end at Mater Dei. On Texas Football believes Texas and Georgia will be 2 of the finalists and could be where that decision ultimately comes from. Obviously, somebody else, a couple others will be in the mix. So that could change, but we feel like Texas is going to be right there in the end. He is the top tight end on the board. He will be a 5-star prospect. Jeff Banks was by the school late last week, I believe on Friday, last day out on the road. He went from Florida to Cali. I believe from what we were told. Actually, he went to Illinois, then to Cali. He went to Illinois to see another 26 tight end, a 4-star kid who Texas has offered, and maybe like the number 2 tight end on the board, but a guy that we could see visit this spring as well. But Mark Bowman, 5-star tight end from Mater Dei, is an electric prospect at that position, and is a guy that's very, very high on the Texas board overall. Also at Mater Dei, Caden Dixon-White, the 4-star plus wide receiver. Texas has been on him a long time. He's been on campus a couple of times. We expect him back for an official visit in June, if not a spring visit as well. So Texas remains in the hunt on Caden Dixon-White. Cody Green, the right tackle at Mater Dei, the Oregon commitment. He went to Oregon's junior day on the 20th, did not get to Texas. We believe he'll visit Texas, whether that's spring. In the spring, we believe is when he'll visit. Now, will it materialize from there to an official visit? We'll have to see. Then I want to mention Sam Utu, offensive lineman from Orange, California, Orange Lutheran. Sam Utu is not the normal 2-sport guy. He is a 6'5", 295-pound athletic and physical offensive lineman that doubles as an outside hitter in volleyball. There's a YouTube video out there. If you just go to YouTube, search Sam Utu, UTW, you can watch him play volleyball, and it's impressive athleticism. I think Texas is going to be in a pretty good spot, have a legitimate chance for Sam Utu out of Orange Lutheran there as well. And Texas offered a few more guys in SoCal, but those are some guys we're really keeping on, as well as one more from Mater Dei, Sean Scott, the edge / linebackers. He was at junior day on the 20th. He's been on campus 3 times now, 6'3" and change, about 230, 235, has some of that Trey Moore versatility to him and game to him, where he can play off the edge. He could also drop in coverage. Mater Dei allowed him to do that some, started working that into his game this year. Sean Scott, I think, is a guy that I could see officially visiting Texas in June. as well. So that's this week's recruiting breakdown. Thanks for joining as always. Hey, and I started it with a high, and I'll end it not with a bye, but a high. Talk to y'all next week.